In the last decade, we've been really pushing restoration as an agenda. What that means is we need active restoration, we need passive restoration, and we need every management action to be focused on making the place better.
We have an increasing number of stresses on the reefs around Aotearoa. Kina are obviously a big problem in certain parts of the country, so particularly the northeast coast and the top of the South Island.
We are having a look at a site where Nick Shears and his colleagues at the University of Auckland have been removing sea urchins to help the kelp forest regenerate.
We did a kina removal experiment at 4 locations across Queen Charlotte Sound. This obviously required careful consultation with iwi or hapu in Te Aotearoa and also the Tauihu Iwi Fisheries Forum, who allowed us to do these kina removals as part of the research. And we have then been following the recovery of these reefs over the last 18 months.
Ready? One of the areas that I've been active in over the last 5 years has been working with tools and technology that improve our spatial understanding of how marine ecosystems are changing and are being impacted, and see what's happening at depths that our aerial imaging can't reach. Now, this is the boxfish ROV. It is rated to 300 metres, so we can take it down that deep. The deeper we go, the less light we have available, so that's really important to bring out the colour and everything we're seeing. We're just looking at what's going on here, and we can see, for one, that the removals seem to be having an effect on the environment. There's not really any urchins around, so the job they've done is stuck.
Well, the results have been really spectacular. In Motuara Island, we now have a surface canopy of giant kelp forests, so it's incredible to see in 18 months the change from an urchin barren, very little seaweed, and now we have these forests, 10 metre plus plants of Macrocystis. It just shows you there is potential there for recovery in these reef ecosystems. The environment's not that degraded if you can actually remove and control the main stresses impacting, which in this case is the kina. Some of the key learnings with kina removal is that you need to be very systematic and remove kina over a large area. It takes very few kina to actually maintain a barren, so you have to reduce the numbers very low, which is why it generally needs to be done as part of an active restoration program.
We need to distinguish between healthy kina populations and kina barrens. It's the kina and the barrens that cause the problems for the environment and have had a massive impact on reducing fish stocks. You see the spread of these kina barrens all around New Zealand and any country in the world really that has the urchins really prevalent.
A lot of our coast where barrens don't occur, the last thing you want to be doing is taking too many kina out of an area. Kina aren't the bad guy, and kina are an important taonga species, and they're harvested for kai, but in some areas the kina become too abundant. And that's largely related to the fact that the numbers and sizes of predators are considerably reduced. Large snapper or blue cod or large crayfish are important predators of kina. And so, you might think, well, there's still plenty of snapper around, but with fishing, you reduce the size structure. So those large snapper or koura that used to roam over the reefs, they are largely gone. So this is where marine reserves have played a really important role for science in understanding how reef ecosystems are impacted by fishing and how they might recover when they're protected. So within the Lee Marine Reserve, over the first 10, 15 years, snapper and coda numbers increased. They increased in size and have been relatively stable in the reserve since. Whereas outside of the reserves, where the snapper and coda are in lower numbers and smaller, we have more substantial areas of kina barrens.
And that all leads to this long-standing problem, the solution for which ultimately needs to be to bring back the predator species. But in the absence of that, removing kina from barrens enables kelp to come back really quickly. And that is partly behind the philosophy of what we're doing with kinanomics. Kinanomics was born from a global business called urchinomics. And the concept of urchinomics is that you take kina or urchins out of barrens, you bring them into an aquaculture system and you ranch them over a period of 10 to 12 weeks. There's a special feed mix that's made up of different types of seaweed that you feed the kina, and over that period of weeks, what you see is they become incredibly robust and healthy. There have been some differences when we compare kina that have been ranched at ambient temperature through the winter versus a fixed temperature of, say, 20 degrees.
The samples we're testing today, some have been collected from the Coromandel in the North Island, and the others have come from the Marlborough Sounds, and they've been taken from known barrens. They were testing seasonality, and we're also testing some different processing methods. Some of the samples are fresh from the shell, and some have been processed to improve shelf life.
The change you see over the period of 10 to 12 weeks is really interesting. It is a lot sweeter than you would have from wild kina, so it sort of tastes like a salty custard.
We've selected the panellists based on their familiarity or knowledge with sea urchins. So the majority of the panellists are trained chefs. Ultimately, you need a balance there between an umami flavour. You want to have some texture, but then it should be creamy, almost melt afterwards. Generally not looking for too much astringency or bitterness in the aftertaste as well. And that's a real challenge with our wild urchins. When they eat our kelp, the Japanese, the Chinese market find them particularly bitter, and that's why I haven't been able to export them successfully yet to those markets. So that's one of the goals of our projects. We're changing the flavour profile completely. We're seeing a range here of colour profiles from quite light to quite dark. That impacts some of our markets in terms of their preferences eating with their eyes, but interestingly, particularly the Japanese are more nuanced and they're more flavour driven. Colour is not a reliable indicator of taste. It simply is an immediate visual appeal.
The criticism that some people will have of kinanomics is it doesn't solve the problem that caused the kina barren in the first place. So our next big project will be to develop a restorative crayfish aquaculture business. It has been piloted here before. It worked, but the commercial model that was being used then was looking at it solely, how much money can we make? If we turn that concept of the blue economy upside down a little bit, it's saying for every 100 crayfish we farm, if we're releasing 30 of them, at what point in their life cycle can they be released and are likely to survive? Which starts to go towards solving the problem. We also then are growing, under that example, 70 for sale, and you can generate revenue from that, and that enables you to then reinvest your profits into doing more and more of this. This is the evolution, I think, of the blue economy here and globally, is these sorts of businesses and enterprises that are regenerative by design. And you'll start seeing more and more of these coming through over the coming years.
Generally around the world, our markets want product that they know has a positive and sustainable environmental footprint with an excellent story to tell of what we're doing. And then we can become an example for others to replicate around the world.
There's great work being done across the Motu, and all of those small-scale effects cumulatively will have a positive outcome in the Moana. And it's that groundswell of people wanting to see some positive outcomes locally that's really going to drive the restoration.